Hello, and this is the Warpforge with another 40k and chill video. I am in a ravishing dressing gown because at uni the temperature goes off at 10 o'clock at night, and when winter is coming, because it's autumn and I can say that, yeah, the switch radiator is off and I'm absolutely freezing. So to keep warm, I have this ravishing dressing gown. So this 40k and chill video is roughly the second part to a cliffhanger that I left on my Traitors Hate review. And the Traitors Hate review, I would fully recommend watching that before watching this video. You'll learn to, well, I hope you'll appreciate these points more if you watch that video first. The link will be in the video description as well as being on the channel itself. Full disclaimer as well, I am going to be a lot more totalitarian on this comment section below. Now, as you can already understand from the title below, this is very controversial topic because from years of experience, usually these sorts of videos or discussions on multiple forms of social media, from wargame forums to social media outlets like Facebook and Twitter, these sorts of things turn into a piss fest. And the way I've spotted how these things turn to some sort of perpetuating piss fest is that whichever side or perception you take, or whatever side you're on, someone always somewhere down the line uses crude vocabulary to demonstrate their point, and that's what basically starts it off, because that provokes negative emotion, which then devolves into what we know as piss fests. And to avoid that, because I want this to be a lot more constructive than the average Chaos Marine thread that you'll see on social media outlets, I will act a lot more totalitarian on this discussion. So there's a rough guideline to help you. Instead of using crude vocabulary to discuss or to interpret things, try and ask yourself why you think that. Don't say it because it is. Don't say something shit because it is. Ask why you like ideas or like an idea, why you dislike this idea, or why you can agree or disagree on this interpretation because of points X, Y, Z, rather than just going, this is shit, and then just leaving it at that, because obviously I don't want this to evolve into a piss fest. Failure to do so will inevitably evoke a deletion of the comment. And that's what I'm saying. I'm putting my foot down on this discussion because I want something a lot more civil and hopefully a lot more productive than any other thread you've seen before. So, where should Chaos Marines go next? And this is hopefully for the next codex, so that'll be released hopefully during the 8th edition times, whatever that provides. But to roughly give you a point, love things when that happens, but hey, so to roughly demonstrate what I would like to see next, we've got to understand what happened in the past, learn from the past so that we can make better decisions in the future. So what happened in the past? Well, before my time there was 3rd edition Chaos Space Marines, and there was 3rd edition where you had Rhino Rush versus Shoot the Rhino Rush, and if you were a Nurgle Chaos Marine player, you enjoyed that a lot. If you were a Xenos player, or if you were somebody who didn't like rhinos, then it was a hard time, but there were ways to figure around it. It was just really narrow and, from what I understand, very boring. So again, 40k has never been balanced per se. There's always been issues in every edition. That was, from what I gather, 3rd edition's issue. Then you had the golden age of the Eye of Terror Codex. Ooh, sorry. And what happened there was a lot of people got a lot more, from what I understand, there was a lot more accuracy for each individual legion. So you got rules for having Night Lords and respectively making Night Lord stuff. If you had a Death Guard force, you could accurately display playing a Death Guard force. If you had Iron Warriors, you could use Force Organization's chart to swap out and take Basilisks and at the cost of 2 fast attack slots and an extra heavy support slot, and all this fun times, really. All these fun times. And this was typically the golden age for Chaos Marines, from what I gather, because you could play Chaos Marines, but you could play different varieties of Chaos Marines, changing the playstyle. So that generated more fun for you and your opponent, because obviously every game would be kind of different. So if you were playing against Night Lords, you knew you were playing against Night Lords. If you were playing against Death Guard, you were playing against Death Guard. If you were playing against Iron Warriors, you knew you were playing against Iron Warriors. If you're playing against Black Legion, you knew you were playing against Black Legion, etc, 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 etc. Then 4th edition came out, and from what I gather from the meta, it was a case of Tau were awesome with Fissure Fury because you had layers of line of sight, or sort of like altitudes, if that makes sense. So you could shoot underneath Delve Fissures, and Delve Fissures would block line of sight for return of fire and stuff like that. But from what I gather, Rhino Rush for Chaos Nurgle Marines was still a thing, and this is when I roughly started getting into the hobby as well. A month after the new Chaos Marine Codex at the time, from 2007 onwards. And obviously I had no knowledge of what happened. I just got the book and I was happy. Now, a bit more background from the outside perspective of mine. A lot of people were pissed off with the Chaos Marine Codex because it was stripped down and they squatted certain options that people, well, put a lot of time investment as well as money into it. So, for example, from obviously, I didn't have Renegades and Heretics at that time, or Demons, but back in 3rd edition, you could have Demons in the same book as Chaos Marines. Personally, I was indifferent. I didn't really bother with Demons outside my Demon Prince, as you see there. But you also had Renegades and Heretics and Cultists and stuff, and they squat them completely and turned Chaos Demons into an entirely separate codex. Now, back then, you couldn't have allies unless you made some house rules. And if you were a competitive gamer back then, there was a total anathema or abomination, etc, etc, etc. Now, with the meta going on in 4th, they did strip a lot of things down, because the main criticism back in 3rd edition was that it was very clunky because of the amount of rules to accurately reflect each sub-faction within the faction. So obviously you had Space Marines getting their flavours and stuff like that, and they were stripped down in 4th, and Chaos Marines were stripped down in 4th, and this was just to basically provide faster gameplay. Faster gameplay meant more games being played, or more games getting done, and hopefully a bit more balance. Now again, balance is a whole nother ballpark, and I'm probably just going to delve briefly into it, because balance is a whole different discussion for another day. But they basically, from what I gather, they stripped everything down for faster gameplay and hopefully for easier mechanics and streamlined gameplay. And then you had Forge World on the outside, which was to add little bits, drip feeding little bits of a flavour in as well, and all that. So, a lot of people were pissed off, but you could still play competitively. You could have the Nurgle Rhino Rush. When I did Chaos Marines back then, I had my Demon Prince, which did nothing against a fucking Hive Tyrant. Because back then, Hive Tyrants could make you initiative 1, and they could take Tyrant Guard, and then you tried to wound them, and then you could place the wounds on the Tyrant Guard, and then it was all over, because obviously you initiative 1, and then you got swiped by another monster creature, and then you died. Hey, I remember those days when Warp Time was a thing with me, and then as towards the end of 4th edition Codex, it was Lash of Submission Demon Princes, like everyone else. But yeah, that kind of happened, and I also remember doing triple Defiler lists, and that was fun to me. I liked having me Defilers, me little angry crabs going around everywhere, firing battle cannons and just raising all sorts of hell. But for those who are really a lot more competitive than me, you had Nurgle Rhino Rush and then Lash of Submission Demon Princes on top of that. Fast forward a little bit, and we have Matt Ward. And Matt Ward was the face that changed 5th edition. Now, again, depending on people's perspectives, you either love him or you hate him. I'll try and go through why you hated him before why you loved him, because I think if you get through the criticism, you'll understand why people inadvertently love the guy. So, why a lot of people hate the guy was because they didn't play his codexes. Now, I'm going to be honest here, I had my fair share of salt as well back in 5th edition. But a lot of people didn't like, well, it wasn't the case of not liking the guy, but not liking the stuff they produced, because he gave back the fluff bits to the Imperials, well, to the Loyalists. Grey Knights became an entire Inquisitorial Codex, which didn't include Sisters of Battle, because Sisters of Battle was a thing that I don't think anyone was enthusiastic about, not even Matt Ward at the time, and they still haven't got a new codex, but hopefully along the way they should get Plastic Sisters, as already mentioned by Games Workshop themselves. But anyway, I digress. You had Loyalist Space Marines, and they had special characters, which was fine, which changed the Force organisation. Again, other Chaos Marines could do this as well, but then you had extra things on top of that, like if you took Vulcan Heiston, you could reroll from penetration or something like that. And Flamers also did an extra thing as well. If you took, I don't know, Cat or Sicarius, he did another thing. And if you took Pedro Cantor, Sternguard were troops, and that was extremely effective because that just promoted, well, every sort of Space Marine list at the time promoted Alpha Strike, drop pod spam lists, because if you can do null deployment and I-Go-You-Go system, especially at that time, it was very much really hectic and really devastating on your opponent. Outside of that, you then had what is now known to many Chaos Marine players as the Grey Knights Codex, also known as You Weren't There, Man, You Weren't There in 5th edition. I remember taking Dean Princes against Grey Knights in that edition. Pity me. Just pity me, okay? I remember that. Oh, Psy Cannons, how you were the greatest bitch in the galaxy. Yes, I remember those days. Fond memories indeed. But again, Grey Knights was basically Inquisitorial Codex, and the meta at the time was, in 5th edition, was tanks were very much your basis and were very much unkillable. So it was tanks versus shoot the tanks with multigun spam, because multigans, well, back in the day, there were no hull points, and to reinforce this, the penetration chart was more forgiving. For example, if you rolled a natural 6, boom, your vehicle would explode. Multigans would provide +1 to the chart and stuff, and if you took a glancing hit, it would just do -2 on the chart. So the glancing hits weren't as forgiving, but the penetrations were, hence why you wanted to penetrate a lot more. Multigans were very efficient with 2d6 plus strength from penetration, and a lot of people took them, especially with drop pods. Bam, multigun, done. You've done your job. So that was essentially the meta, and that's why Nurgle Rhino Rush was still a thing back then. And then you had Grey Knights with the side cannons, which I think ignored invulnerable saves or did Rendon or something like that. You had the Dread Knight spam, and you could make varieties of lists competitively, and everyone hated that. For example, you could do Inquisitorial Guard, well, not Inquisitorial Guard, you could do, what was it, the Henchman, where it was the Inquisitorial Henchman with the Inquisitors. You could take Drago spam, you could take Dread Knight spam, you could take Purifier spam. And again, these were all very efficient at flavour, yet most other armies didn't get this. And this is why Matt Ward delved into a love-hate situation. Unfortunately, Matt Ward only did Space Marine Codexes, and I think that at the time there was a lot more non-Imperial players than Imperial players or Codexes at the time, and therefore a lot of the vocal majority started speaking out against Matt Ward, which delved into the whole perpetuating meme fest that we have only spoken legends of today. Yes, so you had that, and then you had the Ultramarine controversy of Ultramarines were always the best of the best. But I won't go into that, so digressing. Again, so you hated him for that, but you loved him because if you were playing Loyalists, you did get a very looked after codex. He looked after the Blood Angels at the time. He looked after the Grey Knights and what I like to call Inquisition Codex, just with Grey Knights instead of actual Inquisition, because you wanted to sell the Space Marines at the time. And then you had Space Marines, and I think that was it. Dark Angels was still 4th edition all the way up until, like Chaos Marines, all the way up until 6th edition, and then they got Codex updates. And then you had Space Wolves, which were made by a different Codex writer, but people loved that Codex anyway, because you could do Long Fang spam, because Long Fangs were really cheap at that time, so you could just spam them and split fire. And you could do all sorts, so they still held 2 feet in the ground, even though they weren't Matt Ward Codex. So if you were playing Loyalists or Imperium at that time, especially with Imperial Guard as well, made by another Codex designer, but because they were the tank army at the time, and and tanks again, as I've said, were very hard to kill. You were having it. If you were an Imperial player, you're having the time of your life. Even if you were a Sisters player, because people often underestimated Sisters, they usually got obliterated because people who played Sisters knew what they were doing at the time. So if you were an Imperial player, you're having the time of your life. If you weren't, you were hating it. And this goes without no exception for Chaos players. Everyone started hating it. The only time you enjoyed playing anything that wasn't really Imperial was either Orcs or Demons, from what I understand. Because Demons had Fate Weaver with rerollable invuln saves or armor saves, especially on Juggernauts of Khorne, which had a 3-up save at the time. And you had Orcs, which could effectively do a variety of fluffy lists as well. For example, Can Wall spam was a thing, because you could trade out the Force Organization chart to have Killer Cans when you had a mech as a leader, or you could do Battle Wagon Rush and spam Battle Wagons, or you could literally just make like Can War, which was Death Dreads and stuff. People liked Death Copters, you could really spam the Death Copters back then. Again, there was a lot of flavour for the Orc Codex back then. And there was a lot of flavour for Demons. Well, I say there was a lot of flavour. There was a few lists that did really well at tournaments. Then you had Dark, and as 5th edition started to come towards its end days, you got better Xenos Codexes. But for the majority of the time, if you're an Imperial player, you loved it. If you were not an Imperial player, you loathed it. But then we got onto 6th edition. And this is the Codex that we have today. And that Codex is still... What it was that Codex, you could tell where the 6th edition rules were just slapped in. That was designed for 5th edition, and they couldn't release it in time, so from what I gather, they added just a load of 6th edition rules into that book, and a few warlord traits, etc., etc., and just released it as the new Codex for 6th. Again, it was just a direct copy and paste with the 6th edition rules, and then you saw what Royalists got again, which was Chapter Tactics, and not Combat Doctrines at the time. You got Chapter Tactics and all that, and people started making direct comparisons of how Chaos Marines used to have all these things, and then they got stripped down, bulked down into blandness, yet Space Marines were growing with these extra special rules to make them more flavourable. So if you're fighting Raven Guard, you knew you're fighting against Raven Guard. If you're playing against, even today, if you're playing against Iron Hands, you know you're playing against Iron Hands. If you're playing against Ultramarines, you knew you're playing against Ultramarines, etc., etc. The same can't be said for Chaos Marines anymore. So why are people so bitter? And that's the second point. As I've just said before, because of the stripped downness of what is now this Codex and the 4th edition Codex, and with the resurgence of more fluff or more lore accurate or lore flavour of other codexes like Loyalist Marines and stuff, it has let people... when you've got an army that you've invested in, and this goes without saying, if you're a hobbyist and you've started playing the game and you've started really building up an army, no matter which army it is, you put time investment in it. You get attached, and you really do enjoy what you do. For example, I'm a Night Lords player. I've built my army the way I want it. I've put time into it. I've put time to paint all these bastards that you see over here. I've put time into converting this bastard over here. So, again, you get attached to these things, and it becomes a lot more personal when certain things get stripped down. So, as I said before, Renegades and Heretics were basically stripped out. You didn't have Cultists in 4th edition. And this let a lot of people down, or a lot of people felt let down during this time. And they haven't really came back until the Imperial Armor 13 came out, in which case you can do allies again. And people are a bit more happy about that, but people rather wish that they were an actual Games Workshop Codex. Now, they could come back, you know, I mean, they've brought back old arms like Adeptus Mechanicus and G-Stay Cult, and I think Deathwatch were a thing back in editions ago, but they've came back. So they could come back. I'm not optimistic about it, but you never know. But a lot of people are bitter because, before I digress again, we still have this sort of bland, spiky Marine Codex, and I'll get into Traitors Hate in a bit, and Traitors Hate basically felt like a bandage on like a knife wound, or just like a plaster on a knife wound, basically. However, this then led to social media. As I said briefly before, on Wargaming forums and stuff, people started discussing their dissatisfaction with this codex and the codex before. And this became very vocal, and you could hear this a lot. And it's really dependent on who made the first move here. But again, this is again going back into the crude accuracy of reflecting one's opinions. Because people were very negative over the book and started flooding over into other factions, started flooding over their opinions and really reinforcing their opinions on other factions of why other factions had it so good compared to Chaos. It started and it sparked up a real piss fest. A lot of Loyalist players began to become really irritable with the Chaos Marine fan base. And so you then had a conflict. And this is, well, it evolved or devolved, depending on your perception of things, into what feels very cutthroat. Now, obviously, if you're into the fluff and stuff, it's the way it should be. But again, this is real life and not the actual fluff of the game. So, when you see a lot of people making bland statements, and it does get annoying at times when you see a Loyalist player just brandishing all Chaos Marines with the same brush. But when you see all these people argue or get pissy with somebody, it's usually because it evolved from 5th edition onwards. And it's a really outdated thing. So I'm going to answer a lot of statements when I mention about brandishing all Chaos players with the same black brush. I'm going to go into a lot of the main points that keep getting rehashed out and have been rehashed out, and why I think they're a bit outdated now these days. So, I'm going to the first one. Power levels. A lot of Loyalist players like to say that Chaos Marine players just want power and they want to be as powerful as Craftworld's Eldar. Whew. Well, to which I say no. Nobody wants to be as powerful as Craftworld's Eldar. Not even Craftworld's Eldar want to be as powerful as Craftworld's Eldar. Now this might count as digression here, but personally from my perspective of things, the only reason why Craftworld's Eldar are so powerful these days is because they've gotten rid of the random element. And if you notice in 7th edition, the power imbalancements are huge. If you play Chaos Marines at a sort of casual to semi-competitive level versus an Eldar list, it tends to go rather sourly unless either rolls are really in the Chaos Marines' favour, or your opponent really is new to the game or really doesn't understand the fundamentals of how to play a war game. So why did I say about the random element? Well, with every faction you get random elements as combat mechanics go, with rolling dice, rolling to hit, rolling to wound. Sometimes you'll get twin linked, and modifiers like twin linked and special rules that come into play to reflect each army, but to also reflect how each force fights with the use of modifying the dice results on the dice. Eldar have done this so efficiently the synergies in each unit in the Eldar force that they've effectively removed certain layers of tactical depth and strategy and basically the random element. So a key rule about this is basically the battle focus rule, to demonstrate my point. So with majority every other faction, if you play like Maelstrom of War, you've got an objective and you've got an opponent who's on an objective and he'll get victory points the next turn if you don't get rid of them, but you know you can get victory points this turn if you go to that objective. You're in a sticky situation where you have to make a tactical decision whether you want to shoot the unit or you want to run towards that objective because you couldn't move there in the first place. Eldar remove that layer of strategical depth and they just go, right, battle focus, I'll run towards that and then shoot that unit. Now obviously other factors can come into play here, but I'm really just trying to demonstrate the basics of my point here. So they've removed that strategical depth. They've also removed a few bits, again, the devil's in the detail. A little few bits here, like Bladestorm on the most basic gun. So the most basic gun has rending. So again, this takes a little bit of immersion from the background out of the game. Well, from the game out of the game. So for example, if you've got a unit of Eldar Guardians, a Max Blob unit, and you Deep Strike a Terminator squad, and right next to that unit, and say that unit survives somehow, you've effectively wiped that Terminator squad away with basic guns because the volume of fire with rending will end up taking that unit. And this come from experience and observations through multiple battle reports. So again, it takes, why does the most basic gun in Eldar remove a really hard unit like Terminators? You know what I mean? Again, the devil's in the detail. Psychic phase. Again, Psychic is meant to be the Eldar thing, which I understand and I appreciate it. But the fact that you have got the Ghost Helm, which basically removes a layer of strategical depth of which psychic power which psychic powers you want, by just ignoring perils on a 2-up, if I remember correctly. Could be wrong, but from what I remember, it was that. It removes certain things. For example, I've seen a few horror lists at tournaments where Eldar players have used demonology to spam like whatever demons, whether it be it Nurgle or Slaanesh or whatever. Usually Nurgle demons because of toughness 4 with Shrouding. And they've rolled so many perils on the charts and they just go, okay, Ghost Helm, ignoring 2-up. So you're effectively, once again, taking fluff out of the game, making the game feeling a lot more mechanical on the table, which is something that you don't want in a very narrative-based game. Sorry, I'm just checking the time. Half an hour intervals as usual. So I'll go into a few more points after this cut. So again, you are taking out those strategical depth, and it has really numbed the Eldar into god tier status that we all know today. Again, this is all from my perception and observation as well as experience. Obviously, people are free to disagree. Just my 2 cents there. And when I've talked to other Eldar players in the area, a lot of Eldar players are getting bored of playing Eldar because of these very same facts. A lot of people, I've talked to Eldar players and they've even told us that they're sick of playing Eldar because they don't like the power creep in 7th edition. They don't like how strong the Eldar Codex is. So when people, so going back to my point, when Loyalist players make accusations that Chaos Marine players just want to be as powerful as Craft World Eldar, no, we just want more flavour in our Codex, and very, very, very few people want to be as powerful as Codex Eldar. Personally, myself, as long as I get to play something that feels like Night Lords and can stand 2 feet in the sand per se, I'm not really bothered. But again, that's digressing. So the next point is, just want to be Loyalists. No. I know a lot of people decide to jump the wagon and go straight to Horus Heresy, or they decided to basically use their Chaos Marines as massive proxies for Space Marine Codex. So I know a lot of people who pick Night Lords, well, pick the Codex and play Raven Guard for the chapter tactics because it feels a lot more fluffier than what we've got in the Chaos Marine Codex for the Night Lords. And again, I personally don't want to be loyalists. I believe we should take aspects from the Loyalist Codex because we are sort of cut from the same cloth. We are some form of Space Marines at the end of the day. But I don't want a copy and paste because that would be boring to me. And what a sense of identity would it give Chaos Marine players? And to really go forward to give them a sense of identity, that goes into one of the final points, which I'll go to later. But in short, no, not everyone wants to be loyalists. We don't want to spam Grav everywhere. Not everyone wants to have a Cyclopia Cabal, which I can understand and respect from certain points. We're just a bunch of whiners. No, a very vocal minority are, but a lot of people... But when you get to that point, it's a lot of people who are sick of the power levels. Again, like I've said with the Eldar Codex, a lot of people are sick of the Codex power creep, and Chaos Marines are no exception to this, or Chaos Marine players. A lot of Chaos Marine players just want to play their sub-faction within the faction. For example, I kind of wish I had Night Lords Legion tactics, so I could feel like I was playing against Night Lords, and my opponent would know that they're fighting against Night Lords and not some form of spiky Marines, or play against Black Legion when they've all been converted and painted like Night Lords, for example. So again, when there are, like I say, there is a very small minority, but again, you have to factor in that a lot of people also use crude vocabulary to provoke a response out of people, which usually is quite negative and perpetuates piss fests. So not every Chaos Marine player, just as much as not as every Loyalist player is a Games Workshop apologist or a Games Workshop White Knight. The next point is you get demons, ... That's Kill Story. That's roughly the equivalent of saying to an Imperial Guard player, you get Imperial Knights. Ha! It doesn't work when you just want to play Imperial Guard, or you just want to tank spam with Imperial Guard. Or you just want to play Foot Guard with Imperial Guard and play really along to the platoons and the orders phase and stuff like that. Again, with power creep and the largest imbalances I've experienced is in 7th edition, telling someone that you can play demons is... You may as well just be saying to, I don't know, Scissors of Battle players, but you get Grey Knights. It just doesn't work. It's a straw man argument. It's fallacy. It's like, for example, to roughly demonstrate the point on the Chaos Marine side of things, okay, we'll get demons, but Night Lords really don't like the idea of mutation. They don't like the idea of demons. I mean, for example, Sevatar and 30k, to roughly emphasise how this has evolved into 40k, Sevatar made friends with the Word Bearer. From what I've understood from one of the stories I've read online, that Word Bearer became a Gal Vorbak. Sevatar saw his transformation and became incredibly hostile towards it, just thinking, nah, what the fuck just happened? This has carried on all the way in, this sort of attitude, has always carried up to the 41st millennium. And it's still very sceptical. In the Night Lords Omnibus, you've got Uzaz, who doesn't really want to worship Khorne, but he wants to have like the powers that Khorne grants. So he's basically trying to cheat the system with Khorne, except the problem with that is you don't cheat the Dark Gods, they cheat you. And the main story of Uzaz is that he goes down a downward spiral of madness into becoming a blinded berserker of Khorne, even though he didn't really want to become that. So, for example, Uzaz in the stories would say things about taking skulls for the Skull Throne, and the rest of the Night Lord rest of the Night Lordsmen around him in a Dreadclaw would often roll their eyes, or Talos would threaten Uzaz, saying he'll put a bolt pistol through his eye sockets, etc., etc., because they don't like the idea of worship. They acknowledge that the gods exist, but they choose not to worship them because they want to be masters of their own destiny from their perception of things, rather than being another slave or another puppet, just like they were to the Emperor, again from their perception of things. And other Chaos Marines I would assume, especially warbands and stuff, could follow this line of attitude as well. From what I understand of Crimson Slaughter end up worshipping the Dark Gods, but only in order to get something out of that, which is to try and attempt to silence the voices going on in their heads. They don't really want to worship the Dark Gods, but they're kind of forced to, in some sort of attempt to make a deal with the Dark Gods to try and silence the voices in their head. So again, we get demons, yeah, and so books. Books are going to probably last. Traitors Hate. There's a lot of controversy about Traitors Hate, and a lot of people, like I said, probably in the Traitors Hate review, it's like a plaster over a knife wound. It doesn't really work, but to me, the intention is simple. For me, Traitors Hate is a step in the right direction, as I said, but it doesn't fix everything, and it doesn't give 110%. It gives, for me, roughly about 40% worth of flavour, but it's not the 110% like other codexes are getting. It doesn't give them a sense of identity, it just gives them a decurion per se. So books. A lot of people complain about, well, I would say complain, criticise about the amount of books. And to roughly demonstrate, I've got a lot of books. So, a lot of books, as you've just seen there. Spoiling that surprise a little bit. So, if you're going to a tournament, and this is from a tournament player's perspective, whilst it is a narrative-driven game, a lot of people like to play this competitively. I myself play this game semi-competitively. At the end of the day, I try on the table to win games, but I try not to play the game to the detriment of the spirit of the game per se. For example, I won't make lists that murder the fluff in the face. For example, I know that there was some sort of tournament list where you had the Mark of Slaanesh Rider Lords with units of Fleshhounds, because specifically marks of said god are different to demons of the same god, so you can mix the units. And that was from perception of things. Judges read into the rules and stuff, and apparently that was okay to go. And that person ended up winning the tournament. He won the tournament, but what, at the expense of what? Murdering the fluff in the face? I mean, at that point the game becomes more mechanical than it should be, and it depends on your perception. To me, that would be no fun, and I would be frustrated to play against that, and I share sympathies for other people who have. That's before I digress. So, at a tournament, you have the rule book. Okay, you need the rules to play. Totally understand. Next, you need the codex. Okay, you want to play your faction? There's the codex. Fine with that. Totally fine. Then, because you want to play to your full strength, you get one of the... You get one or both of the supplements. Okay, I get that. Now you got Traitors Hate. Okay, now this is... okay, I can understand. Maybe extracts. And then if you want Forge World, then you got this. Again, some people might take a few, some people might take all of them. It depends on what the list direction is for that person or said individual, and depends how much they're trying to play on the power side of things. As you can see, this is a fuck ton of books. And when you're playing competitively, this takes time to go through. This is a lot of weight. Now, obviously, there's softbacks available that you can obviously... It thins it down somewhat, and so lessens the weight of things. But, personally, from my perspective, I'm not shelling out another 20 quid for the same codex that I've already got. I got it at the start of 6th edition when it came out. I'm not going to go back and buy a small one or a softback, so I'm kind of stuck with that. So, again, this is a hefty load of books. Now, compare that to Space Marines, who just need 3. Or Eldar, who might have 2, which is like the rulebook and the Codex Eldar. Maybe the Ianaden supplement, depending on how the rulings go in your area. So again, this is a hefty tome. This is heavy. This also takes time to read out of. Now, again, a lot of people say, well, reading's part of the game. You should know what your stuff's doing. Yep, which is fine. I can fully understand reading all this, understand the rules. Then you've got your opponent who asks for rule clarifications. So we'll go through this. We'll go through rules clarification. So say your opponent wants to know a bit more about Dreadclaw drop pods. So again, we'll have to scroll past when you find not Thunderhawks, Dreadclaw drop pods. That's Charybdis, that's the Fluff, that's the Dreadclaws. That's taken a few seconds just to search that page up, and then I've got to read up or give to my opponent to read on, say, the transport capacity, because that's a rules clarification that the opponent wants to learn. Again, that takes time out of the game. That's just one book. So say in this tournament, hypothetically, you're playing Black Crusade with Black Legion supplement detachment with a combined arms detachment of Crimson Slaughter. So your opponent asks for a further clarification on the certain formation that you've taken, such as, well, the Cult of Destruction. Okay, so you've taken a Cult of Destruction. Again, that's taken time to research for the page, and then you go hand it to your opponent or read out to your opponent, which then takes more time. Then you've got each supplement to go through. So you've chosen a Warlord trait, and your opponent wants rules clarification for a Warlord trait. There we go, I found the Warlord trait. And he wants to know about the Demon Heart as well. So that takes more time out of the game to learn about that. To learn about what those do. And then your opponent asks for rules clarification on Cyclopia Cabal. So again, we've got to go through this, and then let's find Cyclopia. There we go. So we've just found the Cyclopia Cabal, and we have to hand it to the opponent or read it out to them about specific rules for the rules in question. Now, we have the Codex. So your opponent wants to learn about, I don't know, Abaddon. Your opponent hasn't fought Abaddon before in a tournament, and he wants to know what Abaddon really, really does. So, or he wants to clarify and read for himself then what Abaddon does. So again, I'm flicking through pages here, We've found Abaddon. There's Abaddon. I give that to my opponent. That takes time for him to read, or for me to read out loud to my opponent, especially over a ton of other voices, because obviously tournaments are usually packed. Now my opponent wants to learn about the Demonology, so he's going to get his book, I'm going to get my book, and they're going to find for a specific power for rules clarification, in addition of combination from all the books beforehand, and we found the Demonology page, and we're learning from Malefic powers. We're going to learn about possession, and that summons a greater demon. Again, the player who has all these rules probably knows them off by heart, but your opponent, to raise the argument or the point that your opponent should know what your units also do, is a bit more fallacy now than it was in previous editions, because there are so many codexes and data slates out there. In addition, you've got certain data slates which are web only or digital editions, or were only selected for a limited print run but got PDF'd by some very nice people out there. So, like, for example, the War Convocation. If your opponent's never heard of that before, because it's very hard to find online, you've got to go through that. And it's not just that. You've got data slates, you've got codexes, you've got, again, campaign books, you've got all sorts of armies. So you've got Adeptus Sororitas, Adeptus Mechanicus, which includes Scutari and Cult Mechanicus. You've got Assassinorium Codex, or whatever the Assassinorium data sets are. You've got Bellacorn, you've got Warzone Fenris, you've got Chaos Demons and Chaos Space Marines and Loyalists and Space Marines and Angels of Death and Imperial Guard and Metarum Tempestus and Harlequins, Dark Elder and Croftlands Order, etc, etc, etc. That's a lot of rules for your opponent to know an entire game for. Again, your opponent's not going to do that. If there's something that catches your opponent off guard, they're going to ask for rules clarification. And that takes time with the amount of books here. And what is the end result of that? Well, the end result of that is that it takes time out of the game. And that's not fair for you or your opponent. And again, it's alright to ask for rules clarification. I'm not trying to demonise that point at all. But again, the problem is these things that I've just went through, they go at different time intervals and they take a specific amount of time away from the game. And what became 5 minutes suddenly becomes 15 minutes out of the game, which is crucial to determine victory or a draw for either opponent or either player of the game. Again, is that fair for somebody at a tournament to go through all these books? Personally, I don't think so. And I'm not putting any blame fingers here. It is what it is at the end of the day. But this is just to highlight the perception that to play either a fluff reflective force or something that you want specific units for, you're having to bring a very weighty tome, and it's not really, and it starts becoming a lot more stagnant, and that's not fun when you're trying to have a fluid narrative-based game, whether be it for casual campaigns or tournaments, etc., etc. So that's books for you. So after all that ranting and raving, we're going to a bit more positive or constructive positivity with where should CSM go next? And this is me going to be wish listing like fuck. So where should Chaos Marines go next? Well, to really understand that question, we've got to understand that this codex lacks identity. Like I said, from all the other books, excluding the rule book, or including it, depending on your perception of things, if you wanted sorcerers and word bearers and demonology everywhere, it could be classed as part of it. This codex is bland as hell. It is. There's nothing for example, I play Night Lords, but I also use the Black Legion supplement. Why am I using Black Legion for Night Lords? You know what I mean? I'm not trying to say I play for power. Again, I've defined myself as semi-competitive. At the end of the day, I want 2 feet in the sand, and I want to give my opponent a challenge, but not to the detriment of the spirit of the game. So I will play, so for example, for Traitor's Hate, I'll play the Raptor talent because I love the Raptor models. I mean, yes, this is a conversion of a Warp talent for me Night Lords for a champion, but I love the idea that's just pre-heresy armor, just warped up. It's very nice as opposed to the spiky Marines, which goes on to the what is the Chaos Marine Codex? Well, it's a stereotype upon a stereotype. To really reference what stereotype it's generating, it felt like at the design of this, if there was more than just a 5th edition Codex with 6th edition rules slapped on it, then it feels that it was based on the stereotype of Warriors of Chaos in space. It feels a lot more like satanic space barbarians in space than bitter veterans of the Long War who feel betrayed or wronged during the heresy and have come back to rectify that old bitter grudge. Or that warband that turned renegade for whatever reason and now has a grudge or an edge against the Imperium, etc., etc. A good example of this is, I'm going to be biased here and say Night Lords against what I play, and the Champion of Chaos rule. Because the boon shot, because Night Lords play dirty. They don't like, the idea of them accepting challenges is something of a myth unless it's a certain challenge that they know they're going to win because they're going to cheat at it. I mean, Sevatar's the biggest cheater of all against Sigismund. Something I'll always be proud of. Sevatar, my man. But yeah, again, they won't accept challenges unless they know they're going to win by foul and dirty tactics. Yet, we're forced to issue and accept challenges, even against something that's going to smush our faces in. Then, if we do kill it, we get the boon shot, which is nice, but again, Night Lords really, well, the majority of the 8th Legion, although fractured, still maintain philosophies and ideologies that they really don't like. The boon, well, they don't like mutation. It's I don't know, warpophobia, you could say. Yeah, I don't even know at this point, but warpophobia, we'll call it that. So again, it's stereotyping. There's nothing to really stop this or prevent this other than house rules going in place, in which case, again, from a semi-competitive player's perspective, that's kind of shooting myself in the foot anyway. So what should go next? Well, we should take aspects from the first point. We should take aspect from loyalist rules. This isn't to say copy direct copy and paste. I'm not talking about taking things copied and pasted from the Space Marine books, such as the psychic powers from the from the new Traitors Hate supplement, which is directly the psychic powers copied and pasted from the Space Marine powers with different names and different descriptions. I personally don't want that. When I read those powers, I was roughly indifferent to them. I didn't really hate them, but I didn't really like them. The only aspects I did like was the idea that I could modify invulnerable saves and I could get AV, armor value, 15 Land Raiders. That seems funny to me. But yeah, what I would like to see to give them a form of identity, because as we just went through, they lack that. It just feels like Satanic Space Barbarians. To give them variety, take aspects. A classical example is how the game has evolved without changing much of the mechanics. It's still a Yugo-Igo system. We still have the same stat lines, etc., etc. But with the inclusion of Psychic Phase and Lords of War like the Renegade Knight or the Imperial Knight, for example, with the inclusion of Psychic levels and formations, the game, play style-wise, has evolved far beyond the use of Force Organization charts. People want to play for their toys. They will pick the formations of Traitors Hate. They will play with with units to boost this sort of playstyle, and in doing so, the game has evolved from individual skirmish bases to a unit by unit platoon basis. I mean, for example, Renegade Knights, back when I started, the largest thing you get was a Hive Tyrant and a Morlock, and for Chaos Marines it was Demon Princes and Defilers. Now we have Titans in the game. Titans, you know? But yeah, again, this just reinforces the point that 7th edition has evolved into this platoon unit by unit game. So what I think should be taken from an aspect should be like the combat doctrines. Take that out and replace it with the mark system. Give the 4 marks plus a 5th additional sort of mark for Undivided. So, for example, 4 marks will be Khorne, Tzeentch, Nargis Slaanesh, and Malice. I know, I'm so edgy like that. But the way the fluff's evolving, I can see Malice making a return, because Gene-Stealer Cult's made a return, so why not? So yeah, I'm just checking the time and all that. Again, half an hour intervals before I cut. So, again, 5, maybe 6 if you include Malice. Undivided could just be whatever. I haven't really thought about the specifics of everything, but I'm just giving the basic concept of ideas here. So, I don't know. Undivided could be +1 leadership. Now, considering the fact we have Traitors Hate now, the whole Veterans of the Long War is a bit more redundant, hence why I think Undivided should be +1 leadership. Because you get hatred towards an even better hatred in Traitors Hate against all armies of the Imperium. So that includes Sisters, Assassins, Skitarii, Occult Mech, Loyalists, etc., etc. So you get something better with that. So what's the point outside of +1 leadership for Veterans of the Long War anyway now? Again, so another aspect you could take away to give further identity is to split that into 2. Veterans of the Long War and Renegade. Again, when I say that the Chaos Marine Codex is bland, it does feel like they're trying to cram 50 Shades of Chaos Marine into one book, and it's failed horribly. For example, there's no difference between a Red Corsair and a Night Lord. There's no difference between a Purge and a Black Legionnaire. So to bring that out, we should have Renegade and Veterans of the Long War. Renegade should be in They Shall Know No Fear. And Veterans of the Long War should be Legion Astarte special rules. They're 2 entire different playstyles. And I know some people might say, well, one's better than the other, but what you've also got to think about as well is maybe Legion Warband tactics. Take an aspect, flesh it out more towards the trait legions and warbands, and you've got 2 entirely separate playstyles where it could force you to take one or the other. And don't add points cost towards these. Again, what do Space Marine players get for 1 point more than a Chaos Marine at core level. They get combat doctrines, and they get the chapter tactics. So why are we paying more points to make a Chaos Marine feel more like a Chaos Marine? Again, this goes from individualities to squad by squad basis. Very few people play smaller 1500 points games now. The game has evolved to 2500 points as being your average game, or at least in my area it has. So again, we've got the loyalist rules here, and just aspects like that, just give them a bit more variety, identity. You have wider variety of restricted war gear. So in this book we have flesh metal, which is a 2-up save. It's like arts fire armor. Great. But it's only on the warp smith. When a Chaos Lord who is in similar aspects like a war boss has gotten through his position through cunning and spite and hate and strength. Therefore, that's kind of assumed that he would try and get the best war gear he would have out of his warp smiths. So why can't he get flesh metal? Sigil of Corruption was a brilliant step in the right direction for me, because I love having that invuln save, but why is a Warpsmith getting better armor than a Lord? I mean, from my perspective, unless it's something that's like a closet hidden secret with like some sort of inbuilt secret among every single Warpsmith, I don't personally think that every Warpsmith could hide this flesh metal secret, if I'm honest. So we're going to cut this and we're going to go back to more points. So again, stuff like that, simple things like that would flesh out Lords a lot more. Because the only individual basis you get now in 7th edition really is with HQs. Everything else is more of a unit by unit composition. So yeah, stuff like that. Hereteks should have access to ectoplasma cannons and Hades autocannons, in my opinion. And they should really make a separation from Hades autocannon. Well, Hades autocannons and I don't know. Hades autocannons could be 1 strength less for Hereteks, so they could be strength 7, AP4. Again, that's a totally different playstyle for Hereteks and the whole army in general. To differentiate the difference between ectoplasm cannons or Forge Fiends and Hereteks, maybe, have a points increase for a standard ectoplasma cannon and retcon the name, standard name for ectoplasma cannons on Hereteks with a points increase because it is strength 8, not strength 7, and retcon the name for the Forge Fiend ectoplasmas cannons to heavy ectoplasma cannons. And we'll go into more of identity now. Again, as we've referenced before, there is a lack of identity in this codex, hence why we have so many other books to reaffirm an identity. But again, we've went through Renegade and Veterans of the Long War, but how about next? Every codex has something to give them a unique playstyle. Eldar, especially if the current codex is coming out. So with Eldar, you've got Battle Focus and Blade Storm. Space Marines, you've got And They Shall Know No Fear, Army-wide, and Combat Doctrines and Chapter Tactics. Adeptus Mechanicus have the Doctrina Imperatives and Canticles of the Omnissiah special rules. Necrons have Reanimation Protocols. They've always had that, but again, it's something that gives them a different playstyle than playing Xenos Space Marines. I'm trying to think as well, any other ones that have cropped up. Genestealer Cults. Genestealer Cults have the Ambush Special Rule army-wide, from what I know, anyway, from Genestealer Cults. Deathwatch have the alternate altercation of some sort of like doctrines, but not doctrines. But it's still quite good, and it gives them a form of identity within the context of playstyle on the table. Now, Chaos Marines, what do they get? They get Marks and they get Veterans of the Long War, which could be cool if they didn't cost points, as I've said before. we're 1 point less than a Marine, and we just get what a Marine stat line. Okay. So again, when we buy marks, it costs a lot more points. It could be up to 2 to 6 points from what I remember. And we've got a further point upon that. So I don't know. Say on a Chaos Marine, we'll buy Mark of Zinch. Just as a bare concept of the point I'm trying to demonstrate. So we'll go to troops here. Where is Mark of Zinch? That's 2 points. If you want Mark of Nurgle, it's 3 points. So again, you're 2 points over a standard Marine now from tactical squads. And then when you add a Veterans of the Long War, that's +1 point. So that's 3 more points than a tactical Marine for toughness 5 and hatred with +1 leadership. Now, if you add Traitors Hate onto that, obviously that's free, which again further invalidates the point of what's the point of Veterans of the Long War when you get hatred Imperium-wide in Traitors Hate. So again, that doesn't really give identity because again, it's on an individual by individual basis when the game's evolved into unit by unit basis. And I try to reinforce that point because that's my perspective of things as the game has evolved from my perception. So again, to really reinforce a unique playstyle, if Games Workshop are very hell-bent on reinforcing this satanic, warped, space barbarian stereotype that they have on the Chaos Marines, I suggest a rule called Sword Rend and Sword Reeve. Sword Rend for standard ectoplasma cannons and maybe some other rule or some other items or relics and stuff. And Sword Reeve for heavy ectoplasma cannons. And the idea is if you've got Soul Cleave for ectoplasma cannons, on a roll to wound, these are usually like AP2 as per standard ectoplasma cannon, but on a roll to 6 to wound or penetrate, it deals -1 negative penalty of a modifier. That's a lot of words in one sentence, I understand that. But -1 penalty on the target's invulnerable save to a maximum of 6+. To me, that would not break the game because every faction has a way of getting D weapons which ignore saves of any kind. Now, I'm not factoring points costs into this or allies into this, etc., etc., and the points cost from allies. But on the base concept, every army does have a way of getting D weapons. So that's why, to me, it wouldn't break the game because every army has a way of getting something that ignores it. Invuln saves as opposed to modifying them. What Soul Rend should do is a -2 modifier on the target unit, and to me that would give them a sense of identity as playstyle in addition to warband tactics and legion tactics and all that. I also believe that instead of grav weapons, again this is taking an aspect from Space Marines and fleshing it out into something different for a different playstyle for Chaos Marines. Instead of grav weapons, we should get Volokite weapons. And I think that would, again, it's a simple aspect. It's not direct copy and paste like the Psychic Powers from Traitors Hate. It's an aspect taken, changed and fleshed out for Chaos Marines to give them a different playstyle, but something that's worth raising an eyebrow for. For example, the Volokite weapon on the Dominus from Admech is really devastating. Now imagine that Hereteks could get Volokite culverins for their units. Imagine if for an additional special weapon you could get Volokite charges or something like that for Chaos Marines. That, again, it would change the playstyle and give them a form of identity, in my opinion. So again, simple things like that. The overhaul on the plastic range. Currently, well, not just on the plastic range, but the whole range as a whole. Currently, there are a few models which are more akin to updated models. For example, I'm going to bring this bad boy out here again. Again, what I love about these models is that these are pre-heresy armour all warped up, and that's how I envision Chaos Marines. Not just spiky Marines with arrows everywhere, kind of going, oh, I'm so edgy, dog. You know what I mean? So something like that on every unit. So Berserkers getting more of that treatment. Mutilators and Obliterators, again, should become a dual plastic kit, in my opinion. Cult Troops, again, a bit like this. But in addition, I feel Cult Troops could get a dual kit. One with range, as the ones we know now, and one with a close combat option, or vice versa for Khorne Berserkers. So, for example, Tzeentch have already been rumoured to have the Inferno Bolters, but also have been rumoured to have, like, the Tomb King power weapon. Well, Tomb King weapons, but more about power and force weapons. Those, like, I can't remember the name for the life of them, but they're like giant mini scythes. I can't remember exactly the name of them, which you have to excuse me for, but I've been rumoured to that. But, like, Noise Marines with sonic weapons. In addition, there could be a dual kit for ones with, like, power halberds, because obviously these were kind of Emperor's children before they became Noise Marines. And to me, I think a good idea would be, or something that'd be cool, is either a massive power pack on them to send out, like, static seizures or something like that, or something that it's extreme LED lighting from a nightclub kind of thing, where they're just constantly flashing really bright lights, so it either blinds the foe, making them easier to chop, or something like the noise weapons, but more short ranged for assaults, and just to blast that out from the backpacks and stuff like that. Something like that, again, furthering identity, giving them a variety of options. But when you play against Chaos Space Marines, you want to know you're playing against different types of Chaos Space Marines, just as you play different types of Space Marines. Nurgle, well, it's the easiest way I can say this is rust weapons. Just give them the rust, just give them, like, either power swords or something with the rust special rule, like from the Plague Bearer kits or Auto 6's Glancing and stuff like that. That would be extremely cool, in my opinion. For Khorne's a bit of a hasty one, because obviously we know Khorne likes combat, but he also likes his autocannons. Now imagine if Khorne Berserkers had a variant where it wasn't so much about being in combat, but they had a different philosophy of claiming skulls and could mass spam Reaper autocannons. Again, if Hereteks can't take Reaper autocannons, maybe having this as an option for World Eaters players would be extremely cool to see on the table. Again, furthering the identity of Chaos Space Marines. And I think it's important to understand as well that whilst we're talking about legions and stuff, we have to also understand that Chaos Marines are something more different to Legion Astartes, because, again, these are veterans of the Long War. They've had the Long War. They feel betrayed. They feel like as if they've been given some sort of really shit hand, and they're very bitter towards that. They're also, technology-wise, very more preserved towards what they have, or making something within the warp, or making or going to some rogue tech priest and saying, right, we need you to refurbish the weapons, just don't try and add mutations on and play with artificial intelligence instead. Stuff like that. They're very much more ragtag than they were in the Legions Astartes, but they still reaffirm those philosophies and ideologies. They didn't suddenly get amnesia and forget all their basic training from both their traditions and their Legion Astartes special rules, which is why henceforth I bring forth the examples of Veterans of the Long War and Renegade, etc., etc. So, again, something like that, furthering the identity of Chaos Space Marines. That's all I have to really say. Last final note is the overall on traits here, because trying to leave things on a positive note. Again, I've tried giving a different perspective on things, and without meaning to go on a whole total rant syndrome, I've tried recording what I've experienced and observed online, and I've tried to make this into a constructive post about what I feel Chaos Marines should get next, because at the end of the day, the days of the Legion Astartes are sort of no more, but they are Chaos, but they have evolved with the times per se. Hence why we should have the traditions of legions, Astartes, and warband tactics, but also having the veterans of the Long War and the mark systems, different combat doctrines, etc. They are Chaos Marines who have either accidentally fallen into the worship of the Dark Gods, or they're on some downward spiral to become that, or they're on some downward spiral towards their own eventual execution of the entire warband or legion. It's all very tragic tales, which is what people like about Chaos Marines. They like the tragic past, and they like the tragic future, and they like the grim darkness. And Chaos Marines are just one of the most grim dark factions you can get in the game, in my opinion. Just the whole tragic spiral downwards and how it won't get any better for them, you know? They haven't exactly... Some of them chose the path of demonic righteousness, some didn't, some felt forced into it, like Thousand Sons and stuff. And all in all, these characters feel flawed, and this is why a lot of people stick with Chaos Marines. As a Chaos Marine player, I feel there's a lot more lore or more character development happening with traitors than loyalists. I personally find loyalists a lot more to be figured out. It's a lot more about purging and slaying the witch and saving the day of the system before a demonic incursion comes and the Grey Knights are forced to declare exterminatist. Because we all know what those inquisitorials are like, those Inquisition members, those Inquisitors pressing that damn right button. But yeah, again, it's a downward spiral. Demon Princes and stuff like that. Again, downward spiral. It's something to become more powerful, to gain more power, but it's not exactly Legion Astartes where they kind of, even back then, only the word bearers kind of accepted demonic assistance. And from that, you can delve really good stories and really good campaigns from, rather as opposed to loyalists. And I'm not trying to criticize loyalist players or loyalists here, but it does feel a lot like, oh look, here's a threat, here's how we're going to deal with the threat. There can be a lot more variables, in my opinion, with Chaos Marines. Like, for example, my Night Lords, I've already thought of like a campaign idea to try out for my friend with this Gene Stealer cults, where we're on a mining facility. The Chaos Marines go on slave hunting, getting slaves for the Dark Mechanicum forges that they're allied with. And it turns out that, a splinter or a high fleet's coming towards that sector or system, and they've just brought aboard a load of cultists who are ready for the day of ascension. Sorry, not cultists, hybrids that are ready for the day of ascension. And they've just went, ah shit, we've just brought this tendril towards us. Again, a lot more variables than just go and exterminate, annihilate, destroy the Xenos, in my opinion, and stopping the Hive fleet from devouring a sector. So again, something that just evolves and inspires more plot development and character development, especially with like your HQs and stuff, like your Demon Princes and your, I don't know, individual sergeants and stuff like that. From a lore perspective, for me, it delves a lot more plot development. And that's what I like. I like creating stories in the 41st millennium. Big-ass renegade knight here, I call him Mordred, playing on the Fallen Knight theme. Mordred, and when he fails, he's called Starscream because he has a habit of blowing up. So I usually curse him and go, you fail me yet again, Starscream. So yeah, that's it. Fun all round. To overall on Traitors Hate, before I digress again, I enjoy Traitors Hate as a step in the right direction. I think they're starting to understand what Chaos Marines are and what their identity should be. And this is reflected in Traitors Hate. I don't believe it's a full fix, as I've said in the Traitors Hate review, but I do feel that this is a good step in the right direction. I hope they keep something like that up. I hope that if Games Workshop watches this video, or if anybody from the Games Workshop Design Studio watches this video, I hope I've given a new, fresh perspective, or something that could get the ball rolling. I would love to see Volkite weapons. I would love to see more flavours of Chaos Marines, rather than just going, oh look, it's Black Legion, it's Night Lords, when it's a Black Legion upon Traitors hit supplement. Look left and right awkwardly. So yeah, that's how I'm going to end off this discussion. Thank you for watching. If you've spent an hour and a half watching through this entire rant and this entire, hopefully more productive than just a rant video, then please give this video a like. If you enjoyed what you saw, well, what you listened to, and you want to see more of these 40k and chill videos where I'm ranting and rambling on, then please click the subscribe button. If you want to see further development of the 8th Legion here, then please, I do an Knave Dominus Nox project channel, which shows how I evolve my force and how I get stuff painted so that I can get battle reports done and sorted. Please subscribe to the channel and hit that notification button so you can get notifications of when I release Night Lord stuff or Orc stuff or AdMech stuff, because I do AdMech as seen by the Doctrine Imperatives channel. Oh, well, not channel, by the project video series. If you want to talk about anything, like I say, I'm more than happy to talk to you guys about this subject, but please keep it civil, and please, please make it productive. Ask yourself why you think these things, and ask yourself, and ask me in a more open manner than about why I may think these things, or whatever point you're trying to, whatever point you're trying to make. Please try and do it constructively and with civility, rather than just rather than just some negative, provoking, crude vocabulary. So, and if you found this video helpful, or if you found like this video interesting to spark off conversations with whatever your gaming group is, then please share this video out, get the name out there. Everyone becomes a lot more happier. So thank you for watching. This is the Warp Forge signing off, and remember, keep on forging.